The aim of this lecture is to show you a simple method that you can use when you need to create more complex array formulas. What we're going to do is get a unique count across rows. So not columns, but rows. And the unique count is based on the criteria that you can see here. So I don't just want to give you a recipe to use for these situations, but what I want to do is show you my steps of coming up with more complex formulas. Because watching my steps and understanding how array formulas work might actually help you the next time you're trying to build a more complex formula from scratch. Now, for me personally, Mike Girvin has been a great inspiration in learning and working with array formulas. So I do suggest that you check out his videos at Excel is Fun YouTube channel. Let's take a look at this analysis. I have here a list of workshops. So they go all the way down to 53. Different companies can take part in the workshops and they can win prizes. One company can win more than one prize. So you can see company D got first place and third place. The question that I need to answer is how many workshops did either of these companies win? So that's B, D, or R. What this means is that this line where I have B and R counts as 1. This line, where I have D 2 times, also counts as 1. So this would be a 1, 1. These would be a 0 because they're not on my list. So if I was only looking at these 4 events, the answer would be 2. Our ultimate goal here is to get the answer with one formula, like in this one. So this might look a bit complex, but don't worry about it right now because I'll be describing each step in detail till we get to this stage. And I'm going to take you through my process of how I come up with this formula because I for sure don't start just writing it out like equals some product and put in frequency or mult. No way. I start somewhere in the middle and then I build on it. So I don't even know what other functions I might need at this stage. I wait, I get stuck, and then I try to think what function could help me to transform this matrix to take me to the next stage. And with Excel array formulas, you can use different ingredients to get to the same result. But you need to have those ingredients on hand. And by having ingredients on hand, I mean that you should know some important functions that work well in arrays. For example, the row and column formula, the matrix multiplication formula, frequency, transpose, and so on. They really work great in arrays because they can manipulate matrices to give you the result that you need in the end. And if you aren't that familiar with these functions, don't worry, I'll try to cover them when I take you through the steps. As a first step, I'm going to solve this using a helper column. That's the easier method. In the helper column, what I ultimately want to get is what I typed in before. I want to get a 1, 1, and a 0, 0 here. To do that, what I can do is use the COUNTIF function. I can take a look at this range and take a look at this one first. So if there is a match, in this case, my answer would be 1, right? I would then add it to the COUNTIF, again this range, and cross-check with the second one. It's because I have an OR condition, I need to use the plus here. And the same for the last one. In this case, I get 2 because I have these 2 companies on my list. Now, how do I get a 1 out of this and not a 2? I can use the min function, get the minimum of 1 and the result of this COUNTIF. In this case, my answer would be 1, right? And before I pull this down to check the other ones, let's fix these with a 4. And that's something I usually forget doing. In these cases, I get a 0 because min 1, 0, 0 is smaller. I could then just sum this up and I'll have the answer. 29. So 29 workshops where either of these companies won. Another way of writing this, so actually my preferred way of writing it, so I'm just going to put helper B and helper A, is to use my favorite formula, which is, surprise, surprise, the sum product formula. So how can we use sum product like this? I'm going to check this range against this range. And this is something I'm going to fix right now. And bracket closed. Now, if you watched my sum product video, I always say the moment you're putting an equal sign in there, open brackets again. So I'm going to do that right now. It doesn't really make sense at this moment because I'm just putting a bracket in a bracket, but it's going to make sense in a second. So 0. It's not what I'm looking for, right? Let's take a look at what's happening here. We're going to go to evaluate formula. What is it doing? It has generated a matrix of true and false values. Notice the comma and the semicolon. The semicolon means move to the next line in the matrix, so the next row. And the way it's doing this comparison is that it checks this against this, that's my true. Then it checks R against B again, that's the false, and K against B. And then it moves to the next row and does B against D, R against D, and so on. And then when it comes to R against R, you get the true again that you see here. The comma and the semicolon become really important when we try to write this as one formula later on. The 0 means that, well, it can't add up true and false values. What we need to do is to perform some type of numeric operation on this, because a numeric operation translates the true to a 1 and the false to a 0. So I can do multiply by 1. That's a numeric operation. But a more elegant way of writing this is to use double negation or double minus signs. This result is what I got before with my COUNTIF function. And now I can wrap this up in the min function, just the way I had before, and I get the same result with less text. Okay, so we can just try it here and sum this column as well. Now comes the difficult part, but also the fun part. We're going to write one formula that helps us get here. Let me show you how I approach this. The first thing I do is to decide on a main function that I think I can use here. That function for me is SUMPRODUCT, because that seems to be the solution of many of the lookups I've done in the past days. The reason I choose SUMPRODUCT in this specific case is also because I have this condition and I have this checking. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the final formula that I think is going to be optimal. It's just going to be my starter formula. The next thing I do is I break down the data set. I don't do it on this entire set because the matrix becomes too big and I can't really understand what it's doing because there's a lot of data. I just take a sample of the data and try to make the formula work on the sample, and when it does, I just expand it to the rest. That's the part I'm going to take. I'll just put a border on there so that we know that we're only doing the operations until here. The answer we're looking for is 4 if I take this data sample. I'm going to write the draft formula here. Start with SUMPRODUCT. I'm going to open bracket again because I'm doing the comparison. And now that's my range. And I'm going to compare it to this. Bracket closed, a plus, because we're going for OR condition. I'm going to do the same for the next ones. We get 6. Why? Because it's doing a 1, 1 here. So that's 2, 3, 4. And we have a match somewhere here. That's a 5. And that's a 6. It doesn't give me 0 in this case. Why? Because I'm doing an operation on them that's forcing it to translate the true and false here to ones and zeros. And we can actually see that if we go back to formulas and to evaluate formula and we step in, you can see these true false values here. And the next step, it's doing the true false for the next round of matrix, you can see here. And now because it's forced to add these together, it's going to translate them to ones and zeros. And then it does the same for the last one. And we get our final matrix. And if we go and add these, we end up with 6. Now this is the stage that I kind of get stuck and think, well, how can I take this to the next level? And my approach is to get this matrix out and paste it in Excel so I can really visualize it. The way to do that is to press F9, so we get our array. I'm going to press Control-C, and then I'm going to press Escape to leave. I'm going to highlight this range, so it has to be identical to this range. The size of it has to be identical to this range. And I'm going to put equals, paste that in, and now not enter, but Control-Shift-Enter. So I bring the values in here. I'm just going to paste these as values to take away the formula. Now I have something that I can grasp. I have something that I can work with. This is my starting point. The end point that I want to be is that this is 1, 1. These are basically zeros. And this is a 1, 1. That's where I want to go. This means that my matrix is going to change. Instead of a 7 by 3 matrix, I'm going to have a 7 by 1 matrix. This is where your toolkit comes in. What formula, what function can I use to actually change the format of this matrix from this to this? The first formula that comes to my mind is the frequency function. Another formula that comes to my mind is the matrix multiplication function. But in this case, I'm going to try and use the frequency function first. I covered the frequency formula in my Excel Online Advanced course, but if you forgot what it does, I'm going to take you through the steps in a bit. I know that that's my starting point, that's my ending point, but I need to do something in between to get here. And that is, I need to make these lines unique. There's no way that I can identify that this is a different one, this is a different line to this line here. They're all ones, so it just goes through and analyzes them. But if I manage to make this line different to this one, so for example, I would have 2 here, and if there was a match here, this would be a 3, and this would be a 6, and this would be a 7, I have the ability of looking at these rows separately. As a next step, I can use the frequency function to see how many 1s I have, how many 2s I have, how many 3, 4, and so on. That should give me a matrix that looks like this and consists of numbers and zeros. So it basically takes us to where we were before we put the min function here. First, I need to get here. The way I can get here is to use the row function. And that means I need to multiply this, but not only this matrix, I need to multiply this entire matrix, the entire result. And that means I need to put a bracket over this part. And I multiply it by the row function. The result is 37. Why? Let's have a quick look. We're going to do F9. Well, this belongs to row 4, so I've practically changed these to 4, this to 5, this one to a 9, and this one to a 10, because it's the row that they're sitting on. But I'd prefer to have this as 1s, 2s, and so on. So I'm just going to press Escape to leave. I'm going to make an adjustment to this and deduct the first row here And because I don't want to start with 0, I want to start with 1, I'm going to add a 1. And I'm going to put this part in bracket because I want the result of this to be multiplied with this. Okay, so this looks better. Let's take a look. That's what we get here. So 1, 1, 0, and that's this one, and the 6 and the 7 is here. We have got to this stage. So let's escape and go out. Now I'm going to use the frequency function to get a matrix that's a 7 by 1. How does the frequency function work? I'll give you a quick summary here. What frequency does is it looks through your data range and it counts the number of occurrences each of the data have and puts it inside certain categories. It's called bins in Excel that you define. For example, if my category was 1 and 7, okay, let's use the frequency function and see what we get. Frequency is an array formula. That means that you need to press Ctrl-Shift-Enter if you're writing it on its own here, and you need to highlight the cells that are going to hold your answer. I'm going to highlight this, and I'll tell you in a second why I'm highlighting an extra one. We start off by writing frequency. First is the data array, that's our matrix here. Second is our intervals, which is this. Ctrl-Shift-Enter. For 1, I get 17. Do I have 17 ones? No. But I have 17 ones and zeros. So the way it works is that anything up and including 1 is what is being counted. Next is 2 to 7. So excludes 1 and includes 7, between 2 and 7. And I have 4 because that's these ones. And the 0 here is anything above 7, which I don't have in this case. If I change this to a 6, I get 1 here, and this changes as well. How can I use this in my formula? Well, I can't have my bins starting from 1. I need them to start from 0 because I need to strip out the zeros from here. So I can have 0, 1 and go all the way to 6. Frequency, this is the one I need to change, and Ctrl-Shift-Enter. So I'll end up with a matrix like this, and you see that when I'm typing this in Excel, I have to highlight an extra cell, but when you use frequency inside an array formula, Excel does this extra one for you automatically. Once I get to this level, all I have to do is check, is this number above 0? And to take it and change it to 1s and 0s. I will have a 1 for the zeros. So in the end, I will need to strip out 1 from my final answer, to strip out the 0. So what this means is that I need to have at least one occurrence where none of these companies won. So at least one cell that holds another company. In this analysis, I'm 100% sure that I will have that because that's why I'm doing the analysis. Otherwise, my answer would always be the count of workshops if only these 3 companies were always taking part and always winning and there was no other company winning. So I can use this formula with a good conscience. We are at this stage. We're going to use the frequency function to get to this stage. All I have to do is to wrap this result in the frequency formula. I'm going to open bracket here, and now we need the bins array. The bins array, to get it dynamic in Excel, it's basically this formula, just without the +1. Put another bracket, that's 21, so that should be this sum. I've actually ended up creating this matrix right now, and we can have a look at it by highlighting this and pressing F9. The next step is to come here, and to do that, all I have to do is to check if this is greater than 0. Now, is that enough? So let's see what happens. F9, and we get a bunch of true and false values. So this is true, 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 false, 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 and true, true. Okay, so I'm just going to press Control Z. And to translate these true and false values to ones and zeros, I can put the double negation here, and we get 5. Since I've written this one now in front of the 15 here, this one now, it's no longer in sync with this, so let's just do that. So this is the stage that we're at with our matrix. All we have to do is to strip out this one occurrence of the zeros, and then we end up with this number. When you write the formula like this, you write it from scratch, you are fully aware of its bugs, of its limitations. And now we know what the limitation is, that we do need to have one company that's not on this list in one of these 21 cells. If it's not the case, we need to create another formula. My first approach when I was given this problem was to use this. And then when I came across this limitation, I thought, okay, I actually want to make this 100% robust, so I'm going to use matrix multiplication. And that's what I'm going to show you in the next lecture. As a last step here, all I do is to copy this here and change all the 10s. In this case, I don't have 10s anywhere else, to 53. So I'm just going to highlight these two. I'm going to do Control H, 10 and 53. That's the same number we have there. In the next lecture, I'm going to take you through the matrix multiplication method, and we're going to see why it's more robust than this method. These are basically the steps you can follow when you create more complex formulas. And I personally find that breaking down the array in this way, it really helps me follow my formula, like follow it in its footsteps. And it helps me figure out how I can take it to the next level, like which formula or function could I plug in now to transform the matrix to what I need. It also helps me understand its limitations. So if for some reason it doesn't work, I know where to find that bug. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.